Wait.
We may just have to go with the...
Okay, what about now?
Hold on, it's buffering. I'm still just getting you. Oh wait, no, I'm getting the computer. Okay.
Cool!
Okay. Yeah, playlist 1 it says. Interesting, because I've got you in a little window, and then I've got that. And
At least I figured it
little
out.
window, and then I've got that. But YouTube's not broadcasting the video, and
Okay, so I figured it
little
out.
window, and then I've got that. But YouTube.
Do you need to update the stream key?
That maybe. Copy. I'm gonna be very.
I'm hearing audio coming back from the channel.
Yeah, the audio's working fine. There's no video.
Ah. Okay, so what does it say under sources?
I've got Skype selected under sources.
Okay, so why isn't it showing your Skype?
I don't know. This is the problem we had, this is the problem we had last week, sweetie.
Dude.
We may just have to do this. I may just have to talk, sweetie. This isn't working.
It doesn't still say we're live.
What?
Something on this says we're live for some reason.
Yes, I shut it down and started it up again and tried it again because it's not offering me the option to update. Honey, I'm going to just have to do it without the images. It's the only option here.
Alright. Love doves.
Love you. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am sorry, we were trying to work out the technical problems we had last week so that we could do a draw my life kind of thing here instead of me just talking. It's not working. I have no idea why it's not working, and I don't really want to fiddle with it and spoil the fact that this is the 1-year anniversary of starting the show. So what I'm going to do is just tell you the story of how I got started doing all this. I think hopefully you guys will find it interesting, and we'll just go from there. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 1-year anniversary of the Paranormal Encyclopedia being founded. It was September 2nd. Technically, it's now after midnight, at least in my neck of the woods, but I was in the Eastern Standard Time Zone when I got started to begin with, so this would be technically the wrong day at this point because it was September 2nd, not September 3rd. But hell with that. I got stuck in traffic. Nothing I can do about that. So, first of all, there's a couple things we got to get through before I get into the storytelling. First, I want to do a couple thank yous. I got to thank my sweetie Amisha because she's the one who's managed to keep this whole thing running. I really don't know where I'd be without her. She's done all the editing from back before we started doing live shows. She's helped me find guests. She's really been a huge help. I gotta thank Drew. I really miss having him as my sidekick slash co-host here. I don't think the show quite works as well without him. I know at least one or two people may disagree, but that's how I feel. I want to also take the time to thank, and I'm going to name all of them because I think they deserve the recognition. Debbie Chestnut, John, Patrick Thomas, Lupus Creepus and Brittany, Robert Snow, John, I'm having one of those. I'm blanking on names. Stephen Lancaster, and John French. John French. That's the one I couldn't remember. Robert Snow, John French, Patrick Thomas, Stephen Lancaster, Debbie Chestnut. These are the people I've had on so far. I am working on getting more, but they're a good part of why this show. Oh, and again, Lupus, of course. They're a good part of why this show is working so well. I have to give them my thanks for taking their time to speak with me, and do the interviews that they've done. And I've got to thank all of you guys. I mean, I'm at 108 subscribers at the time of this video, which is awesome. I mean, we're hitting over 300 views a month. It's not maybe where I want it to be at the end of the day because I'd like to turn this into a full-time gig, but it's a great start and I'm really pleased. I can't stress enough how much I appreciate everybody's support, everybody's help. But I've got a road ahead, but I've got my start. And I want to just take a moment and say that. So I promised that I was going to do my life story, as it were, how I got to be where I am today. For those of you who may not know, my name is, to quote the way that Amisha most likes me to introduce myself. My name is Kevin Mears. I'm a demonologist and paranormal investigator. I think everybody who watches the channel at this point knows that. It's not a grand secret of any sort. But, I didn't start out that way. I started out like everybody else. As some of you may know, I am 40 years old. My birthday was in July. In fact, my birthday is July 11th. I was born July 11th, 1976. There's a funny story there. So, I was born in 1976, the year of the bicentennial. From what my parents have told me, I was originally supposed to be born on July 4th, which would have made me an honest-to-goodness bicentennial baby. Even though technically July 2nd is when they agreed on the Declaration of Independence. But that's a whole other thing. So, I wasn't coming out. My dad and my uncles had an idea, though. And it being the 4th of July, they threw fireworks under my mother's chair in an effort to get me to come out early. Or actually come out on time, I guess. It didn't work. I stuck it out another week. I've heard it suggested that, no, I was too busy reading a book. But yeah, I was born in the evening, actually, here in New Jersey. I lived most of my life in Pennsylvania, but yeah, I was originally born in New Jersey. So I lived in a part of New Jersey called Lakewood for a while when I was a kid. I remember some of it. I was pretty young at the time, and eventually I moved to Pennsylvania. Didn't originally move to New Hope, which becomes important later. I moved to a town called Newtown. And Newtown is where one of the first big important things happened in my life. So if you talk to Ed Warren, or if you had talked to Ed Warren when he was still alive, or if you had talked to Lou Gentili when he's still alive, or when we talked to Stephen Lancaster last week, when you talk to most investigators, you ask them, so what got you interested in the paranormal? They'll tell you they grew up in a haunted house. John Zaffis, another well-known investigator, got started because his uncle was in the field. None of that applies to me. Um, first movies I really remember seeing in the theater were The Empire Strikes Back, and as many of you know, I'm a gigantic Star Wars nerd. In general, I'm a gigantic nerd. Return of the Jedi, and then in 1984, Ghostbusters. I thought Ghostbusters was the coolest thing. I've always had a fascination, as far back as I can remember, with mythology and folklore and things of that nature. But Ghostbusters is what gave me the idea of, wait, people actually claim to see ghosts. I want to go bust ghosts when I grow up. It was never really a serious career plan so much as a hobby. Actually, the first thing I wanted to do was be a private detective. When I was very young, we're talking third, fourth, fifth grade, I was a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. I started reading actually at a pretty young age. My mom says I was able to read before I was 2, as well as speak. I for a while it wasn't that big reading wasn't as big a thing as it would become to me later. I had a really good teacher by the name of Mr. Werkheiser. Fellow alumni of New Hope Silbury undoubtedly will remember work, fondly or otherwise. But he introduced me to Encyclopedia Brown and eventually to Sherlock Holmes. I loved the Sherlock Holmes stories. I honestly can't say that I still enjoy them. They haven't aged well in my mind, I guess. Although I still love, short BBC Sherlock, and Elementary here in the United States, very Sherlock Holmes movies, some of the expanded fiction, and things of that nature. So I still have a bit of the Sherlock fanboy at heart. But I wanted to be a private detective. As I got a little older, I realized, in the real world, private detectives are nothing like Sherlock Holmes. So I was like, okay, I want to be a cop. And then as I got older, I eventually decided I actually wanted to join the FBI. But we'll get back to that story. So, I saw this movie. It knocked my socks off. It went, this is what I want to do. And me and my best friend at the time, a kid by the name of Louis, put on gloves. Why? Because they wear gloves in the movies. I seem to recall, now that I think about it, wearing a tan jacket, because they like the uniforms. Rolled up pieces of paper to pretend to have cigarettes. Again, because they did pretty much all of this stuff we did because it was that way in the movie. And we went around to the neighbors and asked them if they'd ever seen a ghost. And we actually got a couple of stories. None of which I really remember, given this is a very long time ago. I mean, we're talking about 1984, and it's 2016. Which reinforces, for those of you who forgot, how old I am. But all through this time, I kept reading up on myths and legends and folklore, and kind of preparing myself for what I eventually was going to do. I never had, growing up, I didn't have experiences with the paranormal. I got interested in a lot of science fiction and fantasy. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 13. I still play Dungeons and Dragons. So, keep in mind, we're talking about the 80s. I started playing, for those of you who play D&D, I started playing D&D when it came in the red cardboard box with dragon on the cover. I still have a certain fondness for that version of Dungeons and Dragons, and I've run it from time to time. But, Star Wars, Dungeons and Dragons, and Ghostbusters were big influences on me growing up. I was raised Roman Catholic, for anyone who's curious. Although, pretty much I went to church because Mom said I had to go to church. Dad, who was not particularly religious, wanted me to go to church. So I went to church. I went through communion, I went through confirmation, I went through CCD, and then not long after I went through confirmation, I pretty much stopped going to church. And you could say I lost my faith, but that would imply I really had it to begin with at that time in my life. I'm not sure that would be accurate. Um, I would find it later, and we're going to get to that because that factors rather importantly into my story. The other thing that's funny to note in this time period in my life is, so I do this show. I speak at conventions pretty regularly. I did a nationally syndicated radio show with, I think at its height, made probably 1 million listeners all over the world. Um, you know, I've interviewed celebrities. I've interviewed personal heroes. When I was a kid, I was terrified of public speaking. I mean, I remember being in chorus in elementary school and literally running off of the stage. I remember, when I was a kid, like most, if not all of you, I had to play the recorder. I have a number of skills. I do not know how to read music, and I'm not much of a musician. So, I wound up basically finding it out and being able to help record the recorder concert instead of actually having to play in it. Because pretty much the only other thing I could have done was stand there and go like this without actually blowing into it. But the thing that I would find that actually helped me and was I wound up starting to act. And it started in elementary school, my 6th grade, my last year of elementary school, with a play called Davy Crockett and Mike Fink, King of the River. I didn't have a major part in it. I was a random thug that was with Mike Fink. What's funny is there was a giant snafu of communication, and pretty much I didn't make it to any of the... I didn't know, for that matter, know what any of the rehearsals were. I didn't know any of the songs I was supposed to sing. And some guys pretty much most of the other guys who were part of the chorus made fun of me for this and told me how, and would sing the songs to me, and make fun of the fact I didn't know what I was supposed to sing. Funny enough, I actually learned the songs from them. So it was kind of a whole, okay, wait. I don't know how to sing. What again? How does that go? And I wound up being in it. I obviously didn't have an important part. I didn't have any speaking lines. But I at least managed to be in the show. And being there and getting to pretend to be somebody else, it was a little easier for me. In 7th grade, I would wind up getting another bit part in a favorite story of mine growing up, which was Peter Pan. And I'd act on and off through high school. I was also in a play called Anything Goes. I was in Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap. My most memorable role would be in my senior year when I was in, Professor Zoltan Karpathy in My Fair Lady. And we'll get there, because I have some funny things to say about that. I was the technical director for the play Dracula, which is another thing I should say in terms of my fascination with folklore. I have always loved vampires. I don't know why, but I have a passionate love for the vampire. I have since I was a kid. Now here's another funny thing that most of you will probably find extremely surprising. As a kid, growing up, I was a scared little kid. When we'd go down the shore and do the various haunted houses, or with usually me and my sister, or we'd go to Six Flags, because I'm old enough that I was still around. The haunted house there was still around before it burned down. I usually went through like this. I have a vivid memory of being on one of them and seeing a bat drop. Very, as an adult, obviously a very fake rubber bat drop out of the ceiling, and it just freaked me out. And I went like this, and it went like that again. And while I liked horror movies, and I still like horror movies. And the thing for me with horror movies is I like horror movies. I loathe slasher flicks. My favorite horror movies on the whole are Bela Lugosi's Dracula, Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, Lon Chaney's Wolfman, I like the old black and whites. I do like a number of more modern movies. Exorcist, Conjuring, are movie genius as far as I'm concerned. Um, but my great love were the old black and whites. And growing up as a kid, I would sit on Thanksgiving because the one TV channel in my area would actually run back to back classic black and white horror movies from sun up to late into the night. And my family would have to drag me away so that I could go eat Thanksgiving dinner. Other fun, unrelated fact: I hate turkey. Um, so I was never all that gung ho about Thanksgiving. But you know, the interests that would set me on my course started early. And the thing I had growing up is, well, I was underage. I didn't know anyone else that was a ghost hunter or paranormal investigator. So I mostly read a lot of books on the subject. When I was 16, I was working for the school newspaper. I was in a bunch of extracurricular activities. And I wrote two or three articles for the school newspaper. And it was close to Halloween. And I'm like, well, New Hope's... And, for those who missed it earlier, I grew up in a town called New Hope, Pennsylvania. New Hope is famous for being haunted. As an old buddy of mine used to say, if it had a foundation in town, it was haunted. So I decided I was going to do news, and I talked to the editor and got it approved, but I was going to write an article on the local ghosts. So I went downtown one day and went wandering around, tried various shops, and I stopped in the Logan Inn. The Logan Inn is one of the 5 oldest continuously operating inns in the United States. It's beautiful. If anyone out there listening it lives in or near New Hope, or ever gets a chance to come by and go check out the Logan Inn. That has pretty good food. The rooms are beautiful. Room 6 is the one that's most famous for being haunted. But I collected stories from the people that were working there, particularly the hostess was a wealth of information. She worked with the historical site. She told me stuff about the Logan. She told me stuff about the other things in town. And I managed to write a pretty good article on the subject. And that was my first ghost hunt. The other thing I wound up doing a little later is doing a series of tests, originally with the thought of doing an article, although it never really went beyond playing around with doing some tests, but for various psychic powers. Because the thing to realize is, back in high school, like I said, I wasn't very religious. I didn't really believe in demons or angels or God. I was interested in ghosts, and I was interested in psychic phenomena. I was looking to become what at the time was called a parapsychologist, or still is called a parapsychologist technically, not a demonologist. If you had suggested, I read the Amityville Horror in high school, and I remember just not believing any of it. I just didn't think ghosts did that kind of thing. Ironic that now I do. But that was where I was in high school. I remember as well, I want to say senior year, Halloween, the movie The Nightmare Before Christmas coming out. And my buddy and I going to see the movie, and then going to New Hope, because they do as far as I know they still do, but at the time they were doing a ghost tour that was started by a well-known paranormal investigator by the name of Marietta Kent, who sadly had passed away long before I got involved in all this mess. It had written a bunch of books about hauntings throughout the Delaware Valley. Ghosts in the Valley, More Ghosts in the Valley, and Ghosts in the Village, the last one actually being about New Hope. But that, again, it got me going. It got me started. And then, eventually I go off to college. By this point, I had decided that I actually wanted to join the FBI. It just seemed like I'd be able to do more in the FBI than I could do in police or any other local law enforcement. I got to college. I originally was a criminology major at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which is actually a very well respected school for criminology. I was very fortunate to get in. Um, and my endless fascination with the paranormal continued. I started what turned out to be a several year tradition while I was at school of going out to the cemetery on Halloween night to spend a couple hours by myself in the dark. Folks, if you want a good idea of how extremely boring it is being a ghost hunter half the time, imagine sitting, or standing, I should say, most of the time, in a cemetery under the light of the moon and the stars, waiting for something to happen. And most of the time, nothing did. For hours, year after year after year. But something important happened to me. I said on my Facebook that I was going to talk about the case I don't talk about. Or I might talk about the case I don't talk about. I'm not going to go into all of the details. But so, through high school, through college, through part of college, I wasn't an atheist. I wasn't an agnostic. I mostly just didn't think about it. I guess technically I probably considered myself loosely Roman Catholic. And I have had a friend who's going to remain nameless because she's still a friend of mine, and I don't really want to go into details. Out of respect for her privacy. If who knows, she may eventually watch this. But she had a problem with a malevolent spirit. And I had spent years studying ghosts. I knew everything. I knew, maybe not everything there was to know, but I knew a ton about human spirit hauntings. I knew about poltergeists. I knew about the idea that basically some spirits are just repeating repetitions of something traumatic that happened in the area. I understood all of this on an intellectual level, and I was totally unprepared for something legitimately malevolent. And this particular spirit was a real piece of work. And I was shocked. I was scared. I didn't know what the hell to do. I didn't actually see all that much because it wasn't particularly interested in me. I was interested in my friend, although I remember an experience with them trying to do a divination for me using a crystal and it screwing around with it. But the fact that all this was happening to somebody who was a very good friend of mine ticked me off because I didn't know what to do. And I didn't like not knowing what to do. So I decided then and there that I was going to get myself educated. So that if this happened again, I'd know what to do. Ironically enough, the first step in that education came about a year later. So my freshman year was the first time I actually dated. Fun fact, high school I didn't really have a girlfriend. Social awkwardness combined with the fact I got interested in girls fairly late, where most of the most people in my class, which was very small. I mean, I graduated from a class of 50 people. Were already paired up. But I started dating in college and wound up seeing a girl for a number of years. But this isn't the story of my love life. But anyway, my sophomore year, a couple came to the college. You've all heard me speak about them many times. But the couple in question would be Ed and Lorraine Warren. I assume in the lead up to their visit, the school bookstore carried a whole bunch of their books. And everything was promoted, and I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going. And I wound up going to see their lecture. And really enjoying it. And it started opening my eyes to what else was out there. I'd wind up paying for the membership to the New England Society for Psychic Research at the time, which mostly meant I got a newsletter and a card saying I was a member but not an investigator. Um, and I read everything I could by the Warrens. I'd read Malachi Martin's book Hostage to the Devil, and I started educating myself about violent hauntings and about demonic phenomenon. And this experience, this first time encountering the truly evil, is what got me back into religion and back into faith. I will say as well, while I wasn't particularly religious at the time, I was fascinated by religious studies, which is something I still hold. I'd had a teacher in high school, Mrs. Emig. Again, New Hope alumni will probably also remember her very fondly. Um, she was a world cultures teacher who opened my mind to all the other religions out there and just in, induced in me a love for religious studies that I still have. And I have to thank her for that. I owe debts to a lot of people, and a lot of, but and it's worth saying that yes, well, I was inspired by the Warrens. I read the books of the Warrens. I never personally worked with Ed and Lorraine themselves, but at any rate, time rolls around, and eventually I drop out of school. Um, Realistically speaking, this comes down to I fell in love with a girl, and I let that distract me. Now, it's really important to be clear here. I'm not saying it's her fault. It's not. It's mine. She actually actively tried to get me to go to class. I just got lazy and didn't do it. Um, I'm not proud of that, but I'll own my responsibility. And the reality is, if I hadn't, things may have gone very differently. It may not have gone a way that I'm very happy with. But I fell out of school, couldn't afford it. My parents weren't real pleased with me and fairly so, because I had had miserable grades. I tried to enlist into the military, which is the point I found out something that put the kibosh on the idea of law enforcement for me for good. I have a couple of issues, one of which is I have problems in both of my knees. They're not, a lot of people have knee problems because they played sports in high school or whatever. I was born with knee problems. I still don't really know what they are. But the older I get, the worse they get. And basically, I went from having the military very interested in me, scoring very well on the ASVAB, and having a very good shot at getting into military intelligence, to, yep, you can't get in. That's that. I wasn't that gung-ho on military service. Both of my grandfathers served in the Second World War. My mother's dad was Army intelligence, who served in England. My father's dad was a gunner on a half-track, so he was mechanized infantry. He shot, basically, his job was to shoot planes out of the sky. He was part of the Battle of the Bulge. The Christmas Day attack on Germany, he was there, shooting planes out of the sky. I would credit a lot of my love to history to my grandfather, because he used to, when he was still with us, he used to love to tell stories about his service. And it kind of opened my eyes to how much more interesting history can get than the facts, figures, and dates that you get in class. And I still have that. I love this. I love talking history with somebody who actually lived it instead of just reading it. Anyone who's done it can tell you it's different than reading it in a book. But anyway, I fell out of school, and this is the early 2000s. Keep in mind, I grew up in the 80s and the early 90s. The internet was just barely becoming a thing when I got out of school. I've had the same email address since 1994, which is actually, believe it or not, a Rocket Mail account, which has been defunct for years. It was absorbed by Yahoo. But I've had it for so long, so many people know it, I haven't seen a need or logic in switching. I keep a couple of other accounts as well, including two Gmail accounts. But at any rate, I'm getting off track. So I eventually, the military thing failed. I wasn't having any luck finding a job. I was kind of depressed because I had broken up with my girlfriend, who eventually, by that point, was had been my fiance, and I moved home. And I kept studying, and I kept trying to understand the paranormal. Now, there's an old saying. It's a very old saying, actually. I believe it's Eastern in origin, possibly Buddhist, that when the student is ready, the master will appear. This sums my meeting with Lou up pretty darn well. So, I want to say 1998, I'm posting on the Philadelphia Association for Critical Thinking. So yes, a skeptic's website. They have a message board. They have people on this message board talking about living in a haunted house and not knowing what to do. Now, thanks to having spent the last 4 years studying it, I felt I had some idea. And I started posting advice. One day I get this email. Hey, you kind of seem to know what you're doing. My name's Lou Gentili. Would I run Delaware Valley Demonology Research. Would you be interested in coming out with me sometime? And I'm like, cool, sure. And we started to correspond. The first case I did for Lou was here in Jersey. Actually, a lot of the cases I would do for Lou were here in Jersey. But Lou didn't actually come with me. I worked with another investigator by the name of John. He was a very good guy who, as far as I know, is no longer investigating. Lou speculated his wife wanted him to get out of it. But I don't remember particularly. I'm sitting in this house. Lou had said that he wanted me to be alone just to see how I reacted. And the original plan was for me to go down to the basement because it was one of the less active but still active parts of the house. And I did, and nothing actually happened down there. But I'm sitting in the one kid's bedroom. Now, to set the scene, I'm sitting in a chair that's all the way up against the wall. And there's an aquarium over on my right side, 3-4 feet away. Now, I'm sitting there in the dark, because keep in mind, when I say I'm sitting in there in the dark, I don't mean that we turn the lights out. We cut the power of the entire second floor. We were using EMF detectors. We wanted to minimize background electromagnetic radiation. So, yeah, we went to the circuit breaker and switched off power to the floor. So I'm sitting there. I've got a EMF detector in the room. And every once in a while I'm shining the flashlight over it to see if it's doing anything interesting. All the while I'm hearing this noise. Skitter, skitter, skitter. I'm like, what's that? It's clearly coming from the cage. Skitter, skitter, skitter. So I take the flashlight and I shine it in the cage. I can't see anything. Back to the EMF detector. Skitter, skitter, skitter. I'm kind of freaking out. Finally, I shine it over again, and I see this big black scorpion. That's what they kept in the bloody aquarium. I don't know why. But yeah, it was a scorpion. So, a while after I discover I'm sharing a room with a scorpion, I hear this much scarier noise, which is a snarling noise. It's a very animalistic growling. What makes it freaky is it's coming from directly behind me. Now, there's nothing out in the hallway. I checked. There's no space between me and the wall. The chair is against the wall. And it's snarling directly behind me. So I go get John and I tell him what happened. And we eventually work our way into the master bedroom, which is where most of the activity was happening. We sit down on the bed. We take his EVP recorder. If you guys go back to the EVP episode I did, it was same type, different, same model, different design as that one. And it's sitting on the nightstand, and we're talking, we're asking questions. And this is actually the very first time I ever did EVP. Now, I don't remember the question that was asked, but we asked the questions. Eventually, we go home, I get a call from John a little while later. And this is pretty late at night, so my parents, because I'm living at home with my parents, they're pissed. But John's got a very strange question. He wants to know if I remember him using any profanity while we're there. Like, no, neither of us did. It's like, I want you to play something for you and get your opinion. There's, he plays the EVP, and specifically there's a point where we had been watching this light, and it looked like the light on the recorder that showed when it was recording was moving back and forth. We shined the flashlight over it, and it's gone from like this, 3-4 inches from the edge of the nightstand to like this, right up on the edge of the nightstand. Neither of us had done that. Nothing had happened to move it. But we're kind of taunting it, trying to get a response, saying, "Oh, we don't think that's probably has nothing to do with the spirit. You probably can't do it again." Now, nothing happened other than the light, and it seeming to move. Like I said, when he plays it back, right in there, crystal clear, you hear this distinctly male voice go, "You fucking bitch, you fucking whore." What makes it significant as EVPs go is it wasn't. It was as clear as I just said it now. And yeah, that was what the hell situation. But yeah, I started working with Lou. I started training with Lou. All the while he's working, going up to Connecticut every week or so to work with Ed and Lorraine. He never took me with him, unfortunately, but that's okay. And over time, he's teaching me what to do. So one night, about a year after we get started, Lou at this point has been doing a radio show for a while. He starts out on just a local AM station, small AM station. Then he moves it into his house and starts broadcasting out of the basement. I'm hanging out with him one night, and I'm getting ready to go home because he's getting ready to start the show. And he goes, "Hey, why don't you come on the air? Let's see what happens." I'm like, "Sure, whatever." I didn't have work. I was bored. It's an hour drive home. So the show at the time was supposed to run 2 hours. 6 hours into the 2-hour show, Lou looks at me. I look at Lou, and it's like, pretty much was welcome aboard. And that's how I got into radio, believe it or not. It was, what the heck, Lark, one-time thing that went 3 times longer than it was supposed to. It was so popular and successful, we made a regular thing of it. And I would start driving down to Philadelphia once a week. Or, 5 nights a week, I should say. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. To record. And we did it live, just like I'm doing this now. Forgive me, I'm sleepy. Obviously. And we had on George Lutz, we had on Kathy Lutz, Chris Lutz, we had on Bruce Campbell from Army of Darkness, we had on the vampire lady from the Subspecies movies. We had all sorts of amazing guests on. We had some of which were smart, clever, credible people, some of which were bat manure crazy. And everywhere in between. One of my personal favorites was actually a guy by the name of Bishop C. Manchester, who was an English bishop not in a mainstream denomination, who is a self-proclaimed vampire hunter. We had, and I was very pleased by this, Raymond McNally, he's since, as I understand it, passed away. One of the premier experts on Vlad Tepes is the original Count Dracula. I had grown up reading his stuff about Dracula, and it was very cool to get to interview him. We had Lorraine Warren on. Sadly, at the point that we did the week that. Okay, so let's talk about the Amityville week. We had a guy by the name of Rick Osuna on the show. Rick wrote a book called The Night the DeFeos Died. He claimed to have, worked with George Lutz. He's contacted Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., the guy who committed the murders in the Amityville house, in prison, and found out the truth. He'd found brand new evidence that nobody else had found that proved the Lutzes were lying, the house wasn't haunted. And he found proof that DeFeo didn't commit all the murders he was convicted of. And he turned it all into this book. To give you an idea, the book was self-published. If you were to track it down and read it, the man desperately needed an editor. And just, his new information that he had uncovered about the Lutzes was regurgitating everything Stephen Kaplan said. His new proof about the murders was regurgitating a theory that Ronald DeFeo had offered at one point, because he changes his story every other time he comes up for parole. Basically, so here's the thing, though. We have this guy on, and people start coming out of the woodwork. George Lutz contacts him, and it's like, I didn't work, I worked with him for a while. He's telling a bullshit version of the story. I want to tell my side. We had the guy at the time. This is right around the time that the History Channel special Amityville Fact or Fiction came out. We had the guys that produced that on. We had the first reporter on the scene of the murders on. We got a letter from Butch DeFeo Jr. himself, specifically saying that Osuna was full of shit. So we decided, oh, hell with it, let's do a week on Amityville. Sadly, at this point, Ed had since fallen ill. This is before Ed died in 2006. But we had Lorraine on. And Lorraine was a very amazing woman to talk to. But the first night, so we have Lorraine on for the first hour. And taking care of Ed and being an elderly lady, she eventually had opted to go to bed. We decided to keep going. Now we have George on the line, and John Zaffis, who was a very good friend of Lou's. I don't know him as well, but I would consider him a friend and an excellent investigator, had called in. George was still on the line, and we had a caller call in to ask a question. Power goes out. Phones go down. Computers go down. We get the power back on. The computer's back up. The phone's back on, and the three callers back on the line. But we can't broadcast. So for some reason, everything we need to do to broadcast isn't working. It's 1 a.m. at this point. And we just go, guys, we don't know what's going on. Let's fix this, and then can you maybe call in the next night? We're like, yeah, sure. The three callers get off of the line. Everything starts working properly again. Also, during that night, hey, Lord Ruin's tuned in. You may have been around, in fact, for the Amityville week, since you were a listener back in the day. But yeah, that was Amityville. It was a crazy week. On top of other things, I didn't hear it myself, but various listeners told us later that whenever Lorraine spoke, whore, bitch, liar came up in the audio feeds. We'd have stuff like that all the time. We had a night that everything went out after we mentioned the doll Annabelle, and just before that happened, listeners told us that they could hear a little girl laughing on the radio. I remember the one night we're sitting there, and there's a coiled up... Hey, Hey, Circuit Man and Lord Rowan, welcome both guys. But there's coiled up wire on the bookcase near me, and it just flies off across the room. Nobody touches it. Nobody's near it. The room that we did the radio show in, for those of you who don't know, was about the size of a walk-in closet. Was barely, in fact, the size of a walk-in closet. Mostly because Lou stuffed it full of computers. Lord Rowan asked me, "Is it true that Lou Gentile is the man that Satan loves to hate?" Yeah, I think it is. Lou was a character. For those of you who don't know, didn't get a chance to meet him or to hear the show back in the day, Lou was really quite the character, and he was an enormous amount of fun. If you all go online and you look up the Lou Gentile show, you can actually hear recordings of it in various places. I highly recommend doing it. And what I know and what I get right, I owe an enormous debt to Lou for. I can't emphasize that enough. It's in his shoes that I'm walking here. When he died, he passed away in 2006. On his deathbed, knowing they were still trying to fix the situation, but knowing what was going on, knowing he was likely to go, he asked me to continue his legacy. This and continuing the paranormal investigation is my effort to do that. Which leads to another funny story. So, Lou died in 2006. I miss him still. I kind of sometimes feel like I'm floundering without him. But at his funeral, I decided to speak. It was an interesting situation in that, I didn't have a car at the time. A friend of mine was good enough to give me a ride, who didn't even know him. She just did it because she wanted to make sure I could go to the funeral. To her credit, when Lou was actually, the night that Lou died, she was in Long Island, New York at the time. She was driving down so that I could go see him since I didn't have a car. Sadly, she was still in Long Island at the point that he actually passed away. She did everything she could to get there, and I owe her a huge debt for that. And the reality is that she's also why I was able to get to the funeral. So anyway, a bunch of other people spoke. John Zaffis gave a very lovely speech about Lou. Steve Volk was a reporter who works for a big newspaper in Philadelphia. Forgive me, I don't remember it off the top of my head. He also wrote a really good book called Fringology, which I highly recommend people read. Spoke. Father Joe, unfortunately, wasn't able to speak, nor was he able to give the eulogy. I think he probably would have. Unfortunately, the night that Lou died, he actually went into the hospital with an infection, MRSA, in point of fact, which he had caught because Father was visiting sick people in the hospital and giving comfort to them, specifically someone with MRSA, which, for those who don't know, is flesh-eating bacteria. And he was still in the hospital fighting the infection when the funeral rolled around. So I get up to speak, and the thing is, whenever I was with Lou, when I first started out, I tried to write scripts for what I was going to do. He asked, we went to a convention in Harrisburg, and he asked me to introduce him. So I spent the whole night before and the day up to writing a little script, and he just laughed at me. And was like, don't do that. Just go with it. Just say what you want to say. And I did the script, and it came out terrible. And he made fun of me for that, too. As Lord Rowan, I'm sure, could attest to, Lou and I had one of those vitriol, best buds situations going on where we made fun of each other and pulled practical jokes on each other all the bloody time. It was a good part of what made us work as friends. And something and one of the many things I miss about the man. But Lou was a practical joker, and the thing of it was, I get up to the funeral. I kept it short, but I didn't write anything up in advance. I didn't script. I didn't even take notes. I just stood up and said what I wanted to say and sat back down. The main thing I focused on was the importance of honoring his memory and honoring what he'd asked me to do. Um, oh Lord, as Lord Ruin comments, I remember a girl said you were a sweetheart, and Lou replied that you're gay. Yeah, that's Lou all over. And I can imagine, I can see him up in heaven, probably sitting, kicking back with Ed and Father Joe, watching this and having a good chuckle at my expense. He's probably saying it again, knowing him. But so the thing is, I'm talking about how he was you know the saying, brother from another mother. That was Lou and I. That's how we saw each other. We'd been through a lot of shit together by the time that he passed. And I had this funny experience that, of course, I didn't get to see, which was Lou's style all over, where I'm talking, and there's this line of those little tea lights behind me. And they were tea lights, but they were set up in glass. Like if you go into a church and they have the lights that you light for people who are in distress, it looked like that. All lit up behind me. And they're all constant. None of them are flickering. It's just straight, constant light. I start talking about honoring Lou's memory and continuing what he started, and one of them starts to flicker. When I stop talking about that, it goes back to a solid light. It doesn't flicker when anybody else speaks. It doesn't flicker when I'm looking at it. It just flickers at one time. I know it because I had 4 different people in the audience tell me after the funeral was over that it happened. That was Lou's sense of humor all over. All of us knew, and we'd all known him very well. All had a good laugh and agreed on it. But yeah, forgive me, it's still a little hard. Lou was really the point being, Lou was an amazing guy. He was an enormous amount of fun. He was a smart ass who loved to make fun of me, and I got it back as good as he gave, I think. And he set me on the road. I would not be where I am today without his tutelage. When Lou died, another gentleman actually took over, helping me keep my head on straight, who you've also seen me talk about. I just did a tribute video to him when he passed away this year, which would be Father Joe. I actually originally met Father Joe back when I was doing the radio show. He was the priest that Lou worked with. I didn't actually meet him in person until very near the end of Lou's life, strangely enough. But we corresponded over the internet and by phone for years. And Father gets out of the hospital, and Steve had made arrangements and was good enough to invite me and invite Father and another gentleman who had worked with Lou, and we all went together to Eastern State Penitentiary. Oh, the Zeta talk lady. Lord Ruin again, remembering that we had a lady on the show. I don't remember her name, but Zeta Talk was her thing. She claimed to talk to aliens from planet Nibiru. And we had her on a couple of times. And I'm going to comment on that in a minute too. But Lou asked me to ask her if she could talk to the midichlorians. For those of you who don't know, it's a Star Wars reference. It's not a great Star Wars reference because it's from Episode 1, which is by far the worst of the prequels. But I did, and I don't remember. I'm inclined to think she said yes, but I honestly don't remember. One thing I'll say for Lou had patience for the crazy people that I really don't have anymore. I mean, we took all comers when we did the radio show. We had UFO people, we had alien people, we had fairy people, angel, psychics, mediums, people that could talk to angels, conspiracy theorists, vampire hunters, every paranormal thing under the sun you can think of, we had somebody on. And a lot of them desperately needed their medications upped. I had a couple of memorable moments in particular. We interviewed the angel lady, and I managed to wind up making her look very foolish. We interviewed the guy who wrote a book called Forbidden Archaeology. And there's I don't know if you can find the audio, but you can find a transcript. But I got in trouble with our producer at the time. I don't remember which producer, because we went through like 6 of them. For embarrassing both him and the angel lady live on air. Because I had a habit, and I still try to, of when I run into people that I know are full of shit, I like to make them look stupid. But I like to make them look stupid when I can, without actually insulting them. So in both cases, I asked them questions that if they were who they said they were, they should have been able to answer. Specifically with the angel lady, I don't remember with the Forbidden Archaeology guy. You can find the transcript, or maybe I'll look it up and tell you in a different one. But the angel lady, I remember how I got her. So she claimed she could talk to angels. Now, I sit down and I start talking to this woman, and she gives me a reading of my angels. And the first thing I most clearly remember her saying is that my money angel is working for me, but not right away, so it's going to take a while. I won't see it, but it's coming. I'm still waiting on that money angel, by the way, angel lady. And I'm like, this is not... She's saying stuff every stock tarot reader on the planet will tell you. Stuff you Barnum effect all over. And I'm like, she's full of shit, and I can prove it. Now, she claims she could talk to the archangels, too. Particularly, she claims to be able to speak to the archangel Michael. Now, she also, whenever we bring up demons and devils and, fallen angels, she kind of shies away from that under the excuse that she's Jewish. So, like, okay. So, there's a part in the Bible, and I, to my embarrassment, don't remember where, but I'm going to look it up, where the Archangel Michael gets in an argument with the devil over the body of Moses. Jude 1:9. Comments on it. Let's see, I'll quote it directly. I'm going to look for there we go. King James, Jude, chapter 1, verse 9. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. So, and it's mentioned a few other times. But I'm like, okay, I know this verse. I bet she doesn't. I bet... Now, it's a verse in the Old Testament. I'm assuming Michael would probably know the reference. It's like, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to ask Michael for me. There's a part in the Bible where Michael gets into an argument with someone over the body of Moses. I forget who he got in an argument with. Could you ask him? Her answer was, the answer will become apparent in time. I just cited what the Bible says on the subject. So I'm like, and then total bullshit. We kept the chat room going during the show. So I say, somebody in the chat room reminded me it was Satan. Nobody reminded me. I knew it was Satan. I had always known it was Satan. The point was, and you can make arguments. Somebody pointed out to me a few years later that, when you have somebody as famous as the Archangel Michael, there may be stories people tell about him that never actually happened, and he may just not have known. And that would have, if she had said something like, that actually never happened, I might have given her a little credit. He adored it. Yeah. Lord Owen said Lou must have thought it was hilarious that I exposed her for the sham that she is. Lou loved it. And actually, I started setting her up, and this was after after I'd done it to the Forbidden Archaeology guy. Our producer contacts Lou via chat. It's like, Lou, stop him. He's going to embarrass her the way he embarrassed the other guy. Lou's like, no, this is exactly why I want him out of here. And I managed to trip her up. And the thing of it to me is, okay, if she'd said, "Oh, it never happened," or "Oh, it didn't happen that way," or any one of 100 other answers, I might have given her a little more credit. But the answer will become clear in time. That's a bloody magic 8-ball answer. It's like, magic 8-ball. Will I get $1 million? The answer will become clear in time. That's the kind of people that we put up with. And Lou liked it. Lou enjoyed dealing with the nut jobs. I don't necessarily fault him for that. He made a fair amount of his career on controversy. He used to call himself the king of EVP and the king of paranormal controversy. Exactly, Circuit Man. Answer unclear. Please ask again later. I don't want to put up with that nonsense anymore, which is why I'm a little more discerning with the guests that we've had on, and I'm proud to say, 100% of the interviews that I filmed have gone up on the channel. I haven't interviewed a single person as yet and thought, this person's just too crazy. As I've said before, I thank my guests. I'm very pleased with the people I've had on. I'm very pleased with what they've had to say. I'd have any of them on again. But, so I was going to talk a little about Father Joe. As I first met Father Joe over the internet, in the chat rooms, because he was a regular visitor. And then, very near the end of Lou's life, Lou and I did, I was on TV 3 times with Lou, I should say. The first time was, LaSalle University had a TV station called, and it had a show called LaSalle's Forum. Which is, in fact, a really funny example of how things come full circle. So, like I said way back when I got off on this ramble, I first met Lou on the Philadelphia Association of Critical Thinkers website, Fact, right? So they put us on the show, and because they want to, get some controversy going, get a good, lively, healthy debate going, they get a skeptic on. Specifically, they get this guy from Fact, believe it or not, which I thought was funny as hell. I'm sorry. The guy did pretty well. He really is probably we kind of wiped the floor with him, which isn't to say that he was inept. It was just he had experience as a nurse tackling a type of pseudoscience called therapeutic touch, which is basically a westernized form of Reiki. But it's widely treated as scientific fact in the medical community, or at least it was at the time. I don't know if it still is. And he's like, wait a minute, does this thing work? And he wound up testing it and basically got a bunch of trained therapeutic practitioners. The thing was, they didn't actually touch people. They manipulate the aura around people. And it's like, okay, real simple. By touching this energy field, can you tell if somebody's if you're touching a living person or a mannequin? They all say, yeah, we can. So it basically lines up a random sample of people and mannequins behind a sheet with a hole through the sheet so they can reach their hand in. Now, first they do it without the sheet so that the people tested can see whether it's a mannequin or a person, just to make sure it'll actually work. They get 10 out of 10, whatever. They do it through the sheet, and they flunked horribly. Certainly suggesting that this was a load of horseshit. But he had done a really good job of debunking that. He had no experience with ghost hunters. He had certainly no experience with demonologists. He didn't know what to do with us. The second time I filmed with Lou was the Learning Channel in 2001. We filmed in August, actually, which was in New York. You can find it on YouTube. It's called The Entity of the Terror That Comes in the Night. We were one of 4 segments, and it was really good, and I'm very pleased with how that went. The last time I filmed with Lou was Darren Brown Investigates the Ghost Hunter, which is also available here on YouTube. It was a special specifically for Channel 4 in the United Kingdom. For various reasons, I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not a big fan of Darren Brown's work, either in general or on that show in particular. Although I think he's a good magician. It was very near the end. Lou was not doing well at the time, unfortunately. But Father Joe actually got involved in the filming too, and we met at his church in Philadelphia. It was really quite entertaining. Sitting in the other room while they interviewed Father Joe for the documentary, and hearing Jared Brown, this well-known professional magician from England, try and wrap his brain around. Wait, this guy's a priest and an exorcist, and he's a professional magician. Not only that, a professional magician with some serious chops behind him. Which is, I personally think, why pretty much that whole interview doesn't appear on the documentary anywhere. But Lou passed away not terribly long after that, unfortunately. I started working with Father. He introduced me to a really great guy by the name of Matthew Tierney. Matt runs his own group these days called SPREE, Society for Paranormal Research and Education. Excuse me, not investigation. A very good guy. I would recommend checking out SPREE. You can find it on Google or on Facebook. I know the folks that run it, they're all a wonderful group of people that know what the hell they're doing. I have nothing negative to say about them. I've done a couple cases with them and things like that. So the first... Lord Owen wants to know the first investigation the two of us did. I'm assuming he means Lou and I. The very first investigation I physically did with Lou, to the best of my recollection, not counting going out to cemeteries when we were bored, not counting going out to Byberry, which is an abandoned mental hospital in Philadelphia that has since been abandoned. The one night was a case in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I get this call from Lou one day. It's like, "Are you free? We got a case in Johnstown." I'm like, "Oh, I gotta work. Oh, this is really big. It's throwing pennies up the stairs, and the pennies get thrown back down. Can you get out?" So I call out of work. He comes. He picks me up in his van, and we set off on this adventure. The name of the group is SPRE, Society of Paranormal, like Paranormal Encyclopedia, Research, and Education. That's a lot of words. I'm hoping... I'll type it in chat. There we go. So, we drive out there. And there was this rule with Lou and I. We don't know who put it, whether it was God or the devil who put it in force, but whenever Lou and I drove through the Harrisburg area of Pennsylvania, it rained. Usually, I mean, less, drizzle and more like giant thunderstorms. This particular tradition would start here, and it set the tone for the day. Because it wasn't just a thunderstorm, but golf ball-sized hail. The sky was turning green. And the thing is, for those of you who don't know, and for those of you who do, the sky turning green, light thunderstorms starting very suddenly on a clear day, and golf ball-sized hail is all warning signs of a tornado. We didn't know crap and pulled over under a bridge, which in reality is the worst possible place to park in a tornado. I found out later. Lou's central concern was less the tornado at that particular moment and more the hail breaking through his windshield, because it was golf ball sized hail. It was actually his work truck, not his personal car, so he really wasn't supposed to be driving it. So we get out to Johnstown in the evening. Actually, I've told this story a few times on here before. Circuit Man, Circuit Man certainly heard it. Lord Ruin, I think you've been around, but this was a case where the guy would lay in the bed and creatures would walk around him and poke him and pinch him and prod him and shove things down his ears, canals, and things of that nature. Actually, you know what? That isn't the first case I did with Lou. I'm forgetting that the first case I did for Lou was eventually the first case I did with Lou. And since I've talked, and I'm gonna randomly jump here, mostly by virtue of, if you're interested in the things walking around the woman, watch Kevin's Creepy Stories video, because I tell the whole story in detail. And I haven't really talked too much about this case, mostly because it's been a long time. This is in the 90s. So it's this house in Jersey. It's right off of of a military base. And it's just weird. The father of the family is a psychiatrist who works for the military in an undisclosed fashion, although he's not actually technically in the military. There's this guy who's living with the family who's about to enlist in the military, but he has no biological or romantic connection to the family of any kind, as far as we could ever tell. And these crazy things were going on. This is the house, for example, that I was talking about earlier, where I got the growling behind me. This is the house that I got the You Fucking Bitch, You Fucking Horror EVP, which, again, first EVP of my life. We'd see lights flying around. The family members would pull us aside and tell us more crazy things that were going on. Ironically, okay, yeah. So the night that I'm out there with Lou had this habit. He would take us off into another area to talk about what's going on. Usually as a smoke break. So we're all outside, except for one guy. This is actually the first time I met John Zaffis as well. He came down from Connecticut. And John's in the house, and the rest of us are all outside. And we're heading off into the woods for some various reason. We're just seeing all these lights zooming around. And they looked a little like fireflies, but they were actually ghost lights. They were moving much too fast, and they were turning up in weird-ass colors that fireflies don't come in. For example, the black ones that were black on black, but you could still see them. But we're out there talking about how crazy the whole thing is, and we're starting to suspect that the father of the house is in fact a Satanist. And I'm like, wait, if this is some crazy satanic cult, shouldn't we really leave John in the house alone? Lou's response is, no, don't worry about John, he'll jump out a window. I would come to find out later, no, that wasn't hyperbole. John Zaffis had, in some prior instance with Lou, jumped out of a window to get away from crazy people. John's a character. I have a lot of respect for the man. But the three things that most cement my opinion of John Zaffis forevermore were: one, being told he'd jump out of a window; two, after the investigation was over, and we didn't have all that much paranormal phenomenon happen, but John, Lou, two women that were investigating with us, and myself were sitting in a diner talking, and we're like, and the two women and John start talking about the fact that all the time during the preliminary interview that we did when we got there, the dad of the house has a giant hard-on. And from what they told me, because I didn't notice, it was actually pretty big. We actually stopped investigating not much longer after this, so I honestly don't know if he was a Satanist. It was kind of a situation of, we were giving the family specific pieces of advice about what they needed to do to get the situation resolved, and they kept not doing them. And it's like, okay, when you want to start doing what you're told so we can fix this, let us know. If you're not going to follow the advice, there's nothing we can do for you. and that was kind of the end of that. Was he a Satanist? Maybe. Aside from having a heart on the entire interview, John and Lou are talking about how when you deal with certain high-level Satanists, they don't look at you so much as look through you, and this guy definitely did that. There's also, John was saying a big thing at the time, I don't know how true it is now, of Satanists in the military. There's also the whole detail of this guy worked in the military in an undisclosed capacity, and all we knew was he was a psychiatrist, which screams psyops, which gets it, and they get into some really weird stuff. I don't know if he was a Satanist or not. But that would be the very, very first time I was out with Lou. Lou was a character. John was a character. We did many more investigations over the years. And wow, are we jumping back and forth in time here? Not that I'm complaining. It's fun reminiscing, if a little sad. And we've got an hour. We're making this as long as an actual episode, which is okay. I don't have to work till 11 o'clock tomorrow night. I got time to talk. So I'm going to go back on track, as it were. If you have more questions, folks, if you're listening and you're not in the chat room for whatever reason, feel free to ask me questions on Facebook. I have my Facebook open. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. Feel free to beam them to me by mental telepathy if you can. And let me know who you are if you can do that, because I will definitely want to have you on the show. But I worked with Father Joe for many years, until he passed away just this past year, unfortunately. The neat thing that happened in that time, that's a good question. Was there ever an investigation that was too scary or creepy for both Lou and I? No. There were times we got kind of freaked out, but there was never anything. We never backed down. Probably even a few times that we should have. There were times that we said, okay, we're not going to do this because we can't help you if you're not going to, if we tell you to do X, Y, and Z, and you do the opposite of X, Y, and Z, and we tell you to do it again, and you do the opposite again, there's only so many times we're going to go through this. I'm guessing, Circuit Man, that you've tuned in a little late, because you're asking if I might discuss about me discussing the case I never talk about. I actually did talk about it a little bit early on. Keep in mind, this has been going on for over an hour now. So if you're just tuning in, you missed some of the story. And I can get back into more detail on some things, I suppose. But there's a little more I want to tell of how I got to where I am today. Before I do. So before Lou died, there's a series of conventions. It's actually where I met Circuit Man. If you only missed 10 minutes, you should have heard me talk about it. It's a thing that happened to me in college. My first introduction to the demonic. The thing screwing with the pendulum. But at any rate, so there was this convention I started to go to because of a buddy of mine, James. He got a free ticket to this convention Halloween in December, run by this guy by the name of Jeff Mock. He was like, "Hey, I got this ticket. It would be normally this amount to get in. You pay me $10. I think it was like $10, which is half of the cost of the ticket, and it's all yours." It's like, okay, cool. And I went, and I had an enormous amount of fun. There is more to the story, Circuit Man. It's just there's limits to how much of it I'm comfortable talking about. Maybe someday in a memoir. Maybe I'll talk a little more about it later. I got to give it some thought. But at any rate, I went to this Halloween December, and eventually I started going to Jeff's main event once upon a time, which is Jeff Mock's Wicked Winter Renaissance Fair. I started out helping to run a Mardi Gras themed party which was as bad as it sounds, with some friends of mine. And then eventually I'm like, this is a bunch of goth, new pagan, new agey type of people. I had talked to them individually, including some of the people who ran it more than once. They might be interested in me talking about the paranormal. So I submitted an event, started submitting events, and I started speaking. And had an enormous amount of fun. Actually, I want to say the first time I spoke was like the year after Lou died, come to think of it. Yeah, it was February. Lou died in, I want to say, July or August, and it was the following February that I spoke at it. Damn. And I had a huge amount of fun. I met some really wonderful people. I still speak at Jeff's events from time to time. He's a great guy. If any of you have a chance to come to the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area and catch one of his events, I highly recommend it. His next one is Halloween in the Catskills, which is in the beginning part of October. I'll be getting into that more as we get closer. Looks like a great event. I definitely recommend going. But that's how I actually got it started. And then after a while, I'm like, I like talking, but I know other people who might like talking. And Father Joe expressed some interest, which began what's now known as the Perspectives on Paranormal, which is an ongoing panel, which has grown and shrunk over the years. It actually originally started, funny enough, Matt, Father, and I were speaking at Steampunk World's Fair, another Jeff Mock convention. And afterwards, two friends of mine, Holly and Shannon, and Arthur, which would be the Arthur Moyer that we've had on the show, were talking, because they'd all come to the lecture. And afterwards, Holly and Shannon went off to a concert of some kind, I don't remember who. And we're like, okay, we'll meet you after the concert. We can all go out to eat. We were wrapped up in a huge crowd of people all asking questions. So finally, they come back, because the concert's over, we're still standing there talking, and they're looking for us. And we all go out, the two girls, Arthur, Father, Matt, and I all go out to dinner at a local IHOP. And now I'm sitting there having a conversation with Shannon, and I'm listening to Holly and Father having a conversation. I'm listening to Matt and Arthur having a conversation. I'm bouncing back and forth between all these conversations. And I'm sitting there and like, this is really cool. These people have lots of really cool things to say. How can I turn this into something other people would get to listen to? Which is how the Perspective Paranormal panel started. And that was the original lineup. Over time, I brought Drew in, and then more recently, Holly brought in V. Nigel Taylor, the extremely talented singer behind in the band Platform One, who had some really good opinions I would say, to share at Wicked Fair this year. It was the last Wicked Fair. And it continues to grow. I've stepped back from running it, mostly so I could focus on this. And Holly's still running it. I still speak at it, because I think it's fun as hell. But it's been a very neat experience. And even with Father sadly passed on, it is continuing. We're looking at it, or Holly seems to be looking at it involving new and different people and just getting different perspectives on things. At some point, I'm hoping to have her and Shannon on, because their particular areas of knowledge are relevant to the show. If any of you are interested as well, you can see one of the various iterations on this if you go to Four Blind Men and a Paranormal Elephant, which is a filming of the panel that we did the year that Ahmetia and I got engaged, actually, in which Holly and Shannon and Father Joe couldn't make it, so I kind of cobbled something together between Drew, Arthur, and a friend of ours named Andre, who was a very interesting fellow, who I'd also like to get on here at some point, actually. but it gives you an idea of some of the niftiness I've gotten to do. I guess at this point I should make a brief mention of how I met Drew, since I've dragged him into this chaos that is this show. Just in case anybody's curious. So, aside from speaking at Jeff Mock events, I also periodically will run role-playing games at a convention series called Double Exposure. They run DexCon and Dreamation, one in February and one in July. Drew and I originally started hanging out when I was running a game at DexCon, paranormal themed, in fact, although not by no stretch of the imagination are all or even necessarily most of the games I run at conventions paranormal. But it turned out he'd actually come to a couple of my lectures in the past, and I didn't know because it was a room full of 20 or more people sometimes. Yes, the D&D stuff. So, Lord Rowan. Specifically, I want to say that it was actually a game called Deadlands that we wound up bonding over, which is a favorite of mine. And we just wound up hanging out, and mutual interest in the paranormal, mutual interest in history. Story short, he got roped into this mess. It's kind of been one of my long-time standards of things. It's like, you look interested, join us! I've actually gotten people into gaming that way. So you know Deadlands. Good for you. I'd love to get some of the people that wrote that on, for that matter. But that's getting even further off field. But yeah, eventually... So the thing eventually became, I've been running investigations, though I've taken a step back of it because of various health issues and things of that nature. I've been doing lectures. I actually met my fiance through lectures. She started coming to them. I didn't notice at first. We started hanging out at the One Steampunk World's Fair for hours. Pretty much we spent the whole convention hanging out, and then we started dating later that year at DexCon, in fact. Well, just after DexCon. It's a long, complicated story and really off topic. But it's been a really good run. But the thing has always been, it's like, okay, lectures were part of what Lou did. Investigations were a big part of what Lou did, obviously. But he also had this show, and I loved doing the show. I wanted to do my own show. Now, Lou was a technical wizard. I'm not. As you might tell from the number of technical problems we have with this bloody thing. And I'm trying to figure out how the devil to do my own show. I toyed with the idea of YouTube for a while. Amisha was a huge part of getting me off my ass and getting it onto YouTube. I have to give her credit for that. I have to give Father Joe credit. He was a really big support in that as well. Actually, in general, most everyone I know has been very supportive of this. I haven't had a single person going, "Oh, you can't do this. You're insane." I get insane. I have my, from time to time. Anyway, just because you can't talk about the paranormal without people thinking you're crazy. But that's how we got to where we are today, boys and girls. I've hit most of the main points. I can go on in minutia for hours, to say the least. Does anybody have any questions? Anything I glossed over or didn't cover you'd like me to go into? Anything you want to know about me doing the radio show or the various... there's something I'll do. While you all think of if you have any good questions for me. My advice, if you're crazy enough to want to take up public speaking, or if you have to for work or something. Think back to all those speech classes you took you had to take in high school, all those speeches they made you take, and forget everything they told you. Their advice was, I find, completely useless and generally terrible. Don't use notes. Don't, spend hours practicing in advance. Know your subject matter. think through in your head the sort of things you want to talk about, and just get up there and talk. The other thing I would suggest, because I've found it useful, if you're if you have a lot of stage fright, it's not a terrible idea to take up some kind of performing art. For me, it was acting, to a lesser extent, stage magic. Singing for some people, playing an instrument. Get yourself a hobby that requires you getting in front of people. It makes it if you get a hobby and you're passionate about that hobby, to do anything with it, you're going to have to get in front of people. It'll help you get over that stage fright. That desire to indulge your love of performing music, your desire to indulge your love of acting, will help you get past the fear. That's a good question, Lord Ruin. Why was Delaware Valley Demonology Research chosen as the name of the website? Why not Philadelphia Demonology Research? That's a good question. And if I ever get Lou on an EVP again, I'll ask him. I don't know. Circuit Man says there's a difference between delivering a speech and lecturing on a topic of expertise. Every speech I've given in the last nearly 20 years, I give the same way as I lecture on topics. If you've got a public speak, I don't actually recommend using large amounts of notes. Yes, I did. At some point, I'm going to try and figure out how to play it on here for you. I'll tell you the story. So back in the day, when Lou and I got bored somewhere, we do EVP. One of my favorite ways to do it is on summer nights when his family was on vacation down the shore and he had to stay home for work. We'd sit around his house doing EVPs in Philadelphia, seeing what we'd get. When we were in 2001, when we were in New York to film for the Learning Channel, late at night, sitting in the Gramercy East hotel room that they had gotten us, we did EVPs because we were bored. So I'm speaking at Wicked Fair 2 years ago, maybe 3, and I'm rooming with my friends Holly and Shannon, who I did the lectures with, and we're bored. Convention's sort of wrapping up for the night. It had a bit to drink, not much in my case particularly. I've got the recorder with me since I had just gotten it from Father Joe. Like, let's do some EVPs and see what the hell happens. Why? Because why not? And we're doing them, and we're getting the usual growling noises and other unclear sounds. And I started to feel a presence in the room. A familiar presence in the room. I'm like, wait a minute. And I say, I decide to ask a question to see if I'm right. So I say, if you're who I think you are, I'm going to ask you a question. And I want you to answer the question the way the spirits would always answer you when you asked it, when you did an EVP. So I asked the $1 million question. Are you a human spirit? Have you ever lived? Now, whenever Lou asked this question, he asked it in dozens of houses, including his own cemeteries, abandoned mental hospitals, all sorts of crazy places. He always got the same 2-word response. Yes, asshole. I can't guess at how many times I heard that. So I ask, are you a human spirit? Have you ever lived? We don't hear diddly squat in the room, because you usually don't with EVP. So we hit play. We go through the first couple of questions, get various non-committal answers. I ask my big question. We get this distinctly male voice, too low to quite be recognizable, unfortunately, although it was intelligible. The first thing he's doing is laughing at me. The second thing you hear is, "Yes, asshole." So yeah, that would be the night that I caught Lou on EVP. I still laugh about that one. So he's still out there. He's still watching. Father Joe's still out there and watching. I'm well aware of that. I still am kind of the opinion that knowing the two, Father Joe in particular, and the fact the man never took a break from helping people. Every time I talked to him, he was going to the hospital to visit someone who was sick. He was going to the old folks' home to visit someone who was lonely. He was doing this. He was doing that. He was a wonderful guy. As I said at his funeral, and I'll say it again. He was, when I think of what a Christian's supposed to be, he was the standard. I kind of envision him somewhere in a very big, comfortable chair in heaven, with an angel standing over him with a hand on his shoulder saying, "No, sit, you get to rest now. You've done it." Now, Lord Ruin makes the point, if I got someone in EVP, I'd ask them what the afterlife was like. Good point. We've asked. We've gotten a response, too. The response we get, inevitably, is always the same and indicative of the cases that I do. Whenever I've gotten a response to what is it like where you are, or what is the afterlife, what is it like when you die, or anything related to that, is dark. Actually, in general, when you look at reports from exorcists and things of that nature, demons usually describe hell as dark. I've never really had a chance to ask what heaven's like, because I don't get a lot of human spirits, let alone angels, on cases. I sort of wish I'd asked Lou just to see what he said. I'd be curious to see if he said light. Then again, knowing his sense of humor, even if light wasn't the best answer, he probably would have said it just to be a smartass. But yeah, when spirits describe hell, they describe it as dark. I don't know how they describe heaven. I haven't heard one do it. Keep in mind, aside from the fact that it's now nearly 2 o'clock in the morning, which means we've been going close to 2 hours, we're still doing a live show on Sunday. Yeah, I don't know if it's so much, I've never had the chances, I've never thought to ask what heaven's like, the few times I've had a spirit that could actually tell me. The other thing being that Lou had a gift for EVP. Lord Ruin said I'd tell him to turn the light switch on. You could have dropped Lou naked in a field and then dropped a Faraday cage on him with nothing but his birthday suit and his EVP recorder, and the dude would have gotten voices everywhere. Yeah, Lord Ruin pointing out that the light switch thing would probably just piss the demon off. Circuit Man responding, "Good way to get ditch slapped by a demon." Yeah, I think you're right. Doesn't mean I'm not necessarily inclined to try it the next time around. I don't have Lou's unique talent for EVP. I've gotten some. I've gotten some photographs, including, oddly enough, I've gotten photographs in places that he couldn't. I don't know why. Particularly because I'm not really that much of a photographer type person. But I guess everybody kind of has their own unique little way of doing things, and God, because I feel like reminiscing some more. Why don't I do some more goofy Lou Gentili stories? Just as I feel like remembering my buddy. There was the convention in Harrisburg. Now, remember the rule I mentioned earlier. Whenever Lou and I traveled into into or around Harrisburg, it rained. Lou's asked to speak at this convention. And we drive out. It's good. It's not a terribly far drive because of Philadelphia. It took us 5 hours to get from Philadelphia to Harrisburg. Part of it was rain. Part of it was the fact we couldn't find the damn exit. And when I say we couldn't find the damn exit, I mean, we're driving up and the hotel was directly off of a major highway. I mean, you get off of the exit, go around the bend, that's the only way to go, and there's the hotel. Talking to 3 different people that work at this hotel, they couldn't tell us the exit. They each gave us a different number. And this is back, this is back before the days of GPS. This is the days of, GPS is called MapQuest. And the usually not all that helpful directions you printed out before you left. Eventually, tired and irate, we showed up for the convention. Lou, myself, and Harold, who was our producer at the time, while splitting a hotel room. I remember Lou spoke. He wasn't the only one. There was Troy Taylor, who was a fairly big deal in the paranormal at the time. There's a couple of other ghost hunters and things like that. Varying degrees of competency, I'll leave it at that. I remember as well, ironically enough, that at the end of the whole thing, we did a group investigation. Now, it wasn't an investigation, it was a tour. Because right near the hotel was this historic building, and it was supposed to be haunted. So the entire convention, which was probably around 100 people, decided to tour it in smaller groups. And we're all chilling out waiting for this mess to begin. And people break out the sage. For the 3 people probably at most that are going to watch this at some future date and not know what sage is, or how sage factors into the paranormal, I should say. If you don't know what sage is, it's incense. There's this thing called smudging, which is a popular type of defense against spirits. At least from how they were doing it at the convention, it involves lighting a bunch of sticks of sage and waving it around the smoke around your body. We're kind of face palming because, as I've said many times before, what you use to protect yourself is less important than your belief in it. And you had large groups of people that were using sage just because somebody told them to use sage. They had no understanding of what they were doing or why. Which is exactly the wrong way to do this. But we split up. Harold didn't want to go with Lou or I because he's always doing the show with the 2 of us. I thought it would be more interesting to go to, pick a different group and split up. So I wound up going with the people running the convention, which was a group of, I want to say, 5 women who thought they were psychic. It was an interesting experience. I remember going into the kitchen. And this was a turn of the century house, I should say. And we're standing over a vent in the ground. Or, correction, I'm standing over. And when I say I'm standing over, particularly to make a point, I was standing directly on top of a grate. Now, the women are talking about how cold this room is. And how uncomfortable it is because of how cold it is. And, there are spirits here. And I'm looking at them. And I'm like, first of all, you're all gathered around a large vent. It's a turn of the century grate. It's a pretty big freaking vent. 2, you hear that noise? You hear that? It's the air conditioning that just turned on. Oh. But no, it's the spirits. Oh. There's a reason while I believe that there are legitimate psychics in this world that have legitimate abilities, I don't have a lot of patience for people who claim to be psychic. And this is a big part of it. The other thing that was even more ridiculous is, so we're up on the top floor. Now the thing is, everybody's talking about, it's so oppressive over here. I feel, I'm having trouble breathing. It's so tight. I feel so confined. Meanwhile, I'm 5'10", which is pretty average for a guy. But I walk out into the center of the room. And I go from standing like this to like this. Because you see, the roof of the room we're standing in did that. To the fact that I had to bend over like that to be able to stand in the center of the room. And being the eternal smartass that I am, I walked to the. I listened to them talking about how heavy and oppressive the air was. I didn't say a word until I had walked to the center of the room and was like this with my arms up against it. And I looked at them and I went, "Really? Do you think there might be a reason it feels so oppressive up here?" I can't say if the house was haunted itself, but I didn't experience squat in that house that couldn't be explained. Lou criticized me on the valid point that eventually I keep going it, and sooner or later I'm going to meet a actual psychic and look stupid. And my counter which was, when I meet a genuine psychic, I'll give them the credit. If I'm going to meet somebody who's going to tell me that they get bad feelings, or that the air feels heavy and oppressive in a room that's weird-ass dimensions like that, or the room just suddenly gets colder when the AC kicks on, I'm not going to take them seriously. I never have and never will. I've met people that are legitimately psychic. In my opinion, they don't do that nonsense. It's also, in my opinion, sort of example of the type of case Lou hated more than any other, which is what he called feeling cases. He would get it. Actually, oddly enough, I don't get them as often. But he would get these calls of, I feel this horrible, horrible sense of dread every time I go in my attic. It's like, well, okay, have you ever seen anything? No. Weird smells? No. Objects moving on their own? No. No. This is this horrible, oppressive feeling when they went into their attic. You know what he told them? Anybody want to take a wild guess? Somebody in the chat has to have a guess. If you get a horrible feeling in your attic, and only in your attic, what's the most obvious piece of advice? Do 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 do. And Circuit Man hit it the nail on the head. Stay out of the attic. If you have a horrible feeling in one part of your house, try to avoid going to that part of your house. Drew had the excellent advice because of his own background of, because I'm like a contractor, try and figure out why you have a horrible feeling in some part of your house. There may be a good reason for it. Don't expect us to come driving 3 hours each way just because you have the heebie-jeebies. Half the time, in my opinion, you get the heebie-jeebies late at night in your house. Maybe try to lay off the horror movies or the creepypastas late at night. I will say, and I take a fair amount of pride in this. So today, internet radio is a fairly big thing. You've got YouTube channels like the one you're all watching now. Keep in mind, Lou and I were doing this in the late 90s. The internet was just becoming a thing. We were really one of the first internet radio shows. And we were an actual radio show. We had guests, we had advertising, we had, in point of fact, I think it's actually fair to say, and it's not a gigantic secret, Lou hooked an antenna up to the roof of his house and was actually a pirate radio station on top of everything else. If you dig long enough online up on Lou, you can actually find the complaints from the CDC, not the CDC, the FAA. That's the one, right? The people that are in charge of the radio signals. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Circuit Man, for the happy anniversary. It's deeply appreciated. And pleasant dreams. Again, Circuit Man, as well as everybody else, Lord Ruin, as well, and all my other regulars in the chat. Thank you for being a part of this. It's deeply appreciated. You guys are why I've gotten this far. I'm probably stubborn enough to have kept going, even if I hadn't had the listeners. But I appreciate the support I've gotten for people. It means a great deal. And of course, remember to tune in on Sunday night. We will be doing a usual live episode. It's now getting on 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm hungry. I haven't had anything substantial to eat since sometime this morning when I had breakfast. So I think I'm going to wrap it up, folks. I hope you enjoyed my little secret origin story. I'll try and find them, Lord Ruin. He asked where the archives of old shows with Lou are. If you Google the Lou Gentili show, you should be able to find some. If you look up Lou Gentili radio fan here on YouTube, you can even find some stuff. Although they haven't posted in, I think, 2 years, unfortunately. For that matter, if you're interested, there's a very good documentary that was made recently. It used to be available on Netflix. I don't know if it still is. Called My Amityville Horror, which was made by Danny Letts, one of the 3 kids from the Amityville Horror House. And it actually contains a couple of snippets from Lou and I's interview with George Lutz at the beginning. I'm sorry to say, you don't hear Lou or myself on there. It's only George, but it's still pretty cool to see him on the air with us on the documentary. But yeah, if you dig, and I'll dig around and I'll talk to some folks if I can and see if I can't turn something up. Sunday, I'm still going to do cults. I should probably at some point try and do a tribute episode for Lou, just like I did for Father. But again, it's nearly 2 a.m. I haven't eaten all day. So I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. Again, thank you all so much for helping me reach 100 subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting me through my first year on the show. We ain't stopping anytime soon. We got plenty more to go, my friends. So hang in there. But for now, I'm signing out. I wish you all the very best and a wonderful night, and I will see you Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.